What's going on, my good people? Mike Hidalgo here. Thank you for joining me on another FCP Euro DIY. Today we are working on our 2021 Volkswagen Atlas SE. Today on our Atlas, we are going to be covering how to replace your rear shocks. This will be the same process for your Cross Sport and standard Atlas, like the one behind me from 18 up to 24. In front of us, we have some Bilstein shocks, one of the options available on fcpuro.com, along with some new bellows, bump stops, and shock mounts. You may also see that we have a few more parts on the table that look a little extra, and that's because in a larger scale video on this channel, we're going to be doing a complete lift kit. So while we do have some options to lift the rear end, which we will be doing today, we're still going to follow the same standard procedure for those of you just wanting to do a regular shock replacement at home. If you want to see more on the lift kit and what we're doing with this Atlas behind us, which is going to be a fun build, be sure to head over to the FCPuro Media YouTube channel, subscribe to see more there. Now, before we get started on this, let's take a look at some of the tools we're going to need for this job. All right, for this job, we have a 1/2 inch and 3/8 drive torque wrench. I also have a 3/8 drive ratchet and a couple extensions and adapters, a 3 inch and a 5 inch, and a 3/8 to 1/2 inch and 1/2 inch to 3/8. We have a 18 and a 13 mil wrench. As far as sockets go, we have an 18, a 17, a 16, a 13, a 10. And if you're installing the lift kit with us today, then you'll also need the 7 mil. Otherwise, you can ignore that one if you're just doing shocks. Same thing. Moving forward, we have a hammer, just like we did on the fronts. We have some snips, as we're going to be installing a zip tie around our shock bellow. This flathead screwdriver that's really mostly used as a pry bar, along with a smaller pry bar. This is a 17 incher. We have CTA 7466, which is going to help us assemble the rear shocks. We have some power tools, a 1/2 inch and 3/8 drive. And then we have some chemicals, if you will. We have some Loctite, some medium strength. The B2B kit does include some in liquid form as well. Sharpie, we have some dielectric grease, and some torque seal to mark everything once it's torqued up. Not pictured here, but needed is going to be a screw jack or floor jack, depending on if you're working up in the air or on the ground. Now we know what we're working with. Let's go ahead and get started. Back here, we have 5 17mm lug bolts to remove. All right, with the wheel off, we have a better view of what we're working with. Again, for those of you just doing a standard shock replacement, it's still super straightforward, just a few more steps involved. While I have you here and your eyeballs are here, we're going to remove the 2 16mm bolts for the shock body. You don't have to prop anything or support anything just yet, so don't worry about that. We're just going to get our extension in there and our 16 and zap those 2 out. Those are also torque to yield bolts, so we're going to get rid of them as soon as we take them off. Let's lift the car up, get underneath, and a few more things to remove. We're going to remove the 2 expanding rivets up top here for this shield first. I'm just going to go in with a little flathead screwdriver and get those worked up. There's 2, and then we have 2 10 mil bolts on the bottom of that shield to remove as well. Now I'm going to get my screw jack situated to start supporting all of this good stuff here. We're going to get this underneath our lower spring arm. Just take a little bit of that tension off. We have an 18mm bolt with a 18mm nut on the opposite side. Same thing here, nut, 18mm nut, 18mm bolt. We're going to zap these 4 out. We're going to get rid of them. They're one-time use. One of them is longer than the other. This will be longer than the outside one, I believe. And then we'll be able to remove the sway bar and link hardware and drop this arm down so we can pull out the shock assembly and the spring. Then from there, we have a 13mm nut and a 13mm head bolt for the end link. These can be under a little bit of tension, so as you start to zap out the bolt from the back, you'll be able to see if you need to raise or lower the arm a little bit. This will be the cap that we saved from the shock assembly. Just a little dust cap. You can get these new if you're missing them or threw them out by accident. It's not the end of the world. Just gonna pop this off. I'm gonna pull the arm down, get the spring out. We'll just set this to the side for a moment. And we're gonna note the orientation of the spring pad in here. It has a little locating dowel, which is on the bottom side facing in towards the car. So when we put the new perch in, which is going to have the same little hole, this will sit in there like this, and that's going to just allow the spring to go back exactly how we took it out. This center clip here that holds the lower spring perch, or the rubber spring perch, we're basically just going to annihilate it to get it out. We're not going to be reusing it. And again, if you're not doing coil springs or you're not doing the lift kit with us today, then this part is not necessary. There's no need to remove the lower spring arm. And then with the spring perch out, you can see the little locating dowel sits like this. This will now go into the B2B Fab one, and that'll live like this inside of our arm. I'm going to give this a little wipe down, and I like to put a little bit of dielectric grease on this lower spring perch too. It just helps the coil spring pop in and keeps it from making any noise that we've disrupted this lower pad. These are also replaceable. This one's still in really good shape since the car is not that old, so it's simple enough to reuse. Some dielectric grease on the finger, and you'll notice this one also has a stop, just like front struts do. That's where the coil spring is going to butt up, which is what's facing straight to the front of the vehicle as it sits in the spring perch. So just going to keep things the same orientation that they were. Before I throw this spacer and pad back in, we're going to wipe down the lower half of this arm. Just get any dirt and debris that may be in here out. That old clip that we no longer need. Spring perch is going back in. Our spring can go back in. Here's that stop. That again is pretty much facing straight on. You can also mark this before you pull it out of the car if you want to be exact with it. That looks great there. Now what we're going to do is just feed in the shock, get the two top bolts started, and then we'll start compressing this arm back in, get the end link situated, and all that good stuff. We're going to throw our dust cap on. We have our new 16s. These get torqued down to 50 Newton meters plus an additional 45 degrees or 1/8 of a turn. As we start feeding the arm up using our screw jack and or floor jack, we'll make sure to get the bolt started for the lower shock. Then the spindle, same thing, feeding the sway bar end link back into the lower control arm. This one has a nice bit of tension on it, so it's just going to be a little bit awkward to work with, but we have an opening down here that we can come through with our pry bar and start lining things up. So just take your time with it, go slowly, and then we'll torque everything once we're at ride height. All right, as we start going up with the arm, we're gonna get ready to line up these bolt holes. But before we get a bolt on the shock body or the spindle on, we're gonna tackle the sway bar end link first. We're gonna have to go up and then come back down so we can get the bolt through as the end link is at a bit of an angle. So right now my goal is just to be mindful of the shock body, make sure that's still just swimming around where it needs to be. And we're gonna keep going up on this arm until we get the sway bar end link situated. So right now, while this hole was good for one moment, the back side of it is not quite ready. We're gonna get the shock bolt started. This is the longer one out of the two. And now we're gonna switch to the torque wrench, and both of these get tightened down to 70 Newton meters plus an additional 90 degrees or 1/4 of a turn. And these have a torque spec of 20 Newton meters plus an additional 180 degrees. Again, end link only has to come out if you're lowering the whole spring arm to do the spacer for the lift kit. All right, let's get the screw jack out of the way. Let's get our shield back on, get the wheel back on, and see what this thing looks like. Little guy on. We're gonna start with the expanding rivets first. With that, let's get our wheel back on and wrap up this DIY. From there, my good people, we're gonna get these all snugged up in a crisscross pattern just so that we know the wheel's flush to the hub. Drop it back on the ground, torque the lug bolts to 140 Newton meters in that same crisscross pattern. And wrap up this DIY for today. Overall, a really straightforward process on doing a shock replacement on the rear of the Atlas. If you like this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions or comments on what we did today, leave those in the comment section below. And if you like this DIY and you want to see more like them, please consider subscribing. We make new ones all the time. And if you want to see what this thing looks like with the full lift kit, you're going to have to head over to the FCPO Media channel, subscribe to that YouTube, and see more on that there. Thank you for watching. I'll catch you on the next one.